I'd be understating things more than a little bit if I said that the debut of Trust Performance's 130mm travel carbon fiber linkage fork, the Message, got people talking last year. This has been one of the most polarizing products we've seen in years. No doubt in part because of its $2,700 price tag when it was released. Now Trust has since dropped the MSRP down to $1,975, but it is still a shit ton of money, especially when you could get a regular traditional fork for under $1,000, right around $900 actually. So I'm Mike Levy, we're here in Squamish, BC, and we're gonna find out if the Trust fork is hype and hope, or if it offers some advantages over a traditional fork. So first, let's do a quick refresher on the Message, just to remind ourselves of some of this thing's tech. So, 130mm of travel, and that puts it square in the trail riding category. Trust did come out of the gate saying that this would work well on all mountain and enduro bikes, things with 150mm of travel. They've since scaled that back, and we're looking at trail riding. So today we're testing it on the front of a Ibis Ripley with 120mm of travel, and that makes a whole lot of sense. The entire chassis is carbon fiber. That includes the steer tube, the legs, the unicrown, the links, the axle's aluminum, but the rest is all carbon fiber. Sealed bearings at every pivot, and they do include a lifetime warranty as well, which should take some of the stress away. You have a sag guide right here. This tells you how much travel you've used, so you could use it for setup, and you can also see if you're bottoming out. So the Message is air sprung, as you'd expect it to be, but there's actually an air spring in each leg. The damper, that's in the right leg, and it's a through shaft twin tube unit designed by Dave Weigel. Down here, you have your low speed rebound adjuster, and up here, you have a 3-position pedal switch. There's a rubber port right here, and that hides 2 more adjustments. Use a 3mm hex key to tune how the fork feels in the open mode and the medium mode. Now let's talk about all this stuff back here for a second. This was also designed by Dave Weigel, and he's located these pivots and made these links to precise lengths to have this perform exactly how we wanted it. Now you know the back of your full suspension bike, how those linkages and those pivots, they're designed to do a certain thing at a certain time. It's the exact same thing with this. Now Trust is saying that the geometry of this linkage and how it acts on the trail creates more stability. Now I take that to mean more consistent handling, and they do that by increasing the trail number as the fork goes into its travel. The axle path of the Trust fork isn't straight like it would be on a traditional telescoping fork, and that means that the offset changes as the fork goes into its travel. Now that increases the trail number, stay with me here, which makes it feel like your bike is getting slacker as the Message goes into its travel. That creates the stability that they're talking about. Now I'm here to review Trust Message fork, but I also brought along another fork to compare it to, and that is Fox's 34 factory float with a Fit 4 damper. Now there are all sorts of forks out there to choose from, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of comments saying, why didn't you choose this? Why didn't you choose that? This also has 130mm of travel, the same as the Message fork, and it's a high-end option intended for trail riding. Now I chose this one with the Fit 4 damper because it offers similar adjustments to the Message fork. Up here you have a 3-position switch, open, middle, and firm, and you also have a low-speed rebound dial down here. Of course, it's also air sprung just like the Message, and as I said before, same amount of travel. Weight-wise, it's lighter, 1,860 grams on my scale, where the Message, 2,000 grams on the same scale, same length steer tubes. So, a fair bit lighter. Now it's also a fair bit less expensive. MSRP on this bad boy, $909. MSRP on this, $1,975. Those numbers, they're gonna matter more or less depending on who you are, but what we're here to find out is how these two compare on the trail. So let's go do that. So we're up here in Squamish. I have the Message and I have that Fox 34, and we're gonna do some back-to-back testing on all sorts of sections. First things first, because I know you guys wanna see this thing use all its travel and bottom out, we're gonna take it off a drop. Now, this drop isn't all that huge, you know, it's maybe 5 feet, but keep in mind, it's a trail bike fork. We're on a trail bike, we're gonna ride the fork how it's intended. I should also mention that I have a lot of time on both these forks already, so both of the setups are pretty dialed. I'll mention down below in the description my setup preferences, but I'm comfortable with both of these forks so far, so let's just hit it. That feels so shitty.
Go do it again.
Okay. We're doing our first fork change. We're gonna take the message off and we're gonna put that 34 on. We're gonna do it on the trail side here. And I promise I'm only gonna lose 2 or 3 headset spacers and a few bolts while I do this. I've taken the message fork off and I put the 34 on. Now I'm gonna do the same drop as many times as my poor ankles will take it, which is only 3 or 4 more times probably. Click. I gotta say the 34 definitely handles those hard bottoming moments better. Now keep in mind, both forks have adjustable air volume. They both use spacers, tokens you could put inside that reduce the air volume for more ramp up. But I have both of these kind of where I want them for all my other riding. And then I figured, hey, what does it feel like when I come off this? Now with the Trust fork, there's definitely a little bit more of a hard bottoming moment. There's more noise. I could feel a little more through the arms and the hands. Where the Fox fork is a little less abrupt with that bottoming out. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna talk about trust claims, about extra stability from that trail growing, the trail number growing. It feels like the bike gets more stable. So I'm coming down here fairly quickly. I'm gonna brake hard, turn into this, and we're gonna see what happens. Now, if trust claims are true, their fork will make the bike handle more predictably compared to the bike with the Fox fork on it. What we're trying to do here is ride it like 80%. You ride it 100%, you're not gonna feel shit, except maybe the ground in a tree. But 80%, we can feel what's coming, we can feel what's happening. So let's do exactly that. All right, so I've just gone through that section a handful of times with the Trust fork and a handful of times with the Fox fork. And the difference, I don't know if you could see it on camera, but the difference on the bike is huge. Now I've been feeling this a little bit when I've been riding the Trust fork, but back to back, it really highlights it. So first on the Fox fork, you're coming in there, you grab a handful of brake, you know, everything feels pretty normal. You're coming through, it feels like a suspension fork does. It's not doing anything wrong necessarily. Swap to the Trust fork, we've got the message on, I come through there, I grab a handful of front brake. The first thing you notice is that yeah, the front end isn't diving. And I honestly wouldn't have said the front end was diving with that Fox fork either, despite what's happening on video. You could see it on video right there pretty well. But the Fox fork doesn't feel like it's doing anything wrong. It's just that the Trust fork, it feels like it's doing the right thing more right, almost would be a better way to put it. So yes, you could see on camera and I could feel on the bike, the fork is staying up in its travel more and the handling is more consistent, and that is making me faster and more comfortable through the corners. Caveat though, the one thing here, I am feeling those bumps more. You could see the rock step up there and that root step mid corner. I feel those more, and you could see it on video. The fork isn't absorbing those things. You think it would, but it's not really moving all that much, or at least not nearly as much as the Fox fork. So yeah, when I come through that corner, I'm going faster, but you know what? I am feeling those impacts more, so something to think about there. All right, so here we are, we're at a very different section of trail. We moved from those corners to something that's a whole lot rougher. As you can tell, this thing is covered in roots. It's covered in very pointy rocks all the way through here. I'm probably gonna get some sort of large stab wound, but before that happens, I'm gonna come through here on the Message and the Fox fork, and we're gonna pay close attention to how the dampers perform. Now this stuff is a pretty rough section, it's a pretty fast section, so let's get to it. All right, so I just came through this section a handful of times with the Trust fork. I've now put on the Fox fork, and we're gonna do the same thing again. I've got some thoughts about the Trust fork here, but I'm gonna hold them tight until I finish up with the Fox fork so we can do some back-to-back. So I've come down here, I've come down this rough ass section a handful of times on both forks, I think 6 or 7 times. The same line every time, very similar speed, same effort, vastly different results. I first came down on the Trust fork, you know, it didn't feel bad, didn't feel like great either, felt like a fork. Swapped over to the Fox fork, and that's where things got interesting. The Fox fork, as you can see in the video, it's using a lot more of its travel, and that means that the bike is doing this more. Much like the last section that we filmed at, it means the angles of the bike are changing more, the handling is changing. Now the Trust fork, I came through here, it's staying up higher in its travel through the entire thing. You could see the attitude of the bike is changing less. The angles are changing less. You know what that means? The handling stays more consistent. And to tell you the truth, I came through here and it was rougher with the Trust fork, but I had more confidence coming through here on the Trust fork. I think this section, I would prefer this, to be honest with you. It's rougher, your body has to do more work, but I'm actually in more control. So I have 7 months of riding on the Trust Message fork, and we've just finished up our back-to-back testing, and the results, well, they've been pretty interesting. So first question, how does it compare to the 34, the traditional telescoping fork that we were using up there? Now that fork, the telescoping fork, the 34, it takes less out of the rider, it's smoother, it is more active. The Trust, the Message, when you're going over the same rough trail, it is transferring more of those impacts back up through the handlebars to the rider. There's no doubt about that, but it's also pitching through its travel way less. So because the Trust fork isn't going through its travel as much, it's staying higher up in its travel, it means that the bike is pitching front to back less. The geometry is staying more consistent, and I think that's why I actually felt faster through those rough sections and all the other rough sections I've ridden for the last 7 months on the Trust fork than on a traditional fork. So that's not all good news though. The fork takes more out of you. This Trust fork, it's passing more energy back up through the rider, it feels rougher, and at the end of a long ride, at the end of a 4 and a 5 hour ride, multiple times I found my upper body more tired than I think it would have been when I was using a traditional fork. So who is it for and who is it not for? Obviously, it is not for somebody who expects a smooth, comfortable ride. Someone who sets their suspension up at 25 or even 30% sag and they're looking for all-out comfort. If you pick up the Message and you try to do that, you're gonna be disappointed. It does not do that. This fork, you know, in a lot of ways, it's like a stiffly sprung short travel bike. It's gonna use all the travel when it needs to, but it's also gonna make you work for that speed. And because of that, it's definitely best suited to somebody who rides a short travel bike hard. It's suited to somebody who rides a short travel bike like they would ride a long travel bike. So that's it for the Message review. I'm sure you have a whole bunch of comments. I'm sure you have even more questions. Put them all down below. We'll do our best to answer them for you. I hope you enjoyed the review. We're gonna go back. I'm gonna put this on my bike. I'm gonna go for another ride. Oh boy. Fuck that up. Ducks think they're so much better than me. So, oh, I forgot to tighten my brake caliper. I have to go get an Allen key. Just 1 second, everybody.